All right, I'd like to call to order the Special Committee on Charter Revisions. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderman Aldridge. Mr. Butler. Mr. Boyd.
Present. Present.
Ms. Ingracia.
Present.
Ms. Gon Cruz. Ms. McClure. Mr. Intagliata.
Present.
President Green.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. Mr. Butler. We have 8 present.
A quorum being present, we have no approval as of yet, so we will dispense with line item 3 and 4 and go on to committee discussions. First, I just wanted to thank all of the members for showing up today and participating in this. As we know, Board Bill 44, which became ordinance number 71607, was passed at the Board of Aldermen and signed into law by the mayor in 2023, which put Proposition C on the ballot. And Proposition C asked voters to establish a charter commission to review and amend the charter every 10 years. Voters overwhelmingly approved Proposition C in April 2023, and the inaugural Charter Commission started its work in August of 2023. That commission then spent the next year completing a comprehensive review of the charter, accompanied by research, interviews, and deliberation before delivering recommendations to the Board of Aldermen, several of which went on to the November ballot. Of those recommendations, the Board of Aldermen sent Proposition B, which was for budget, and Proposition T to the ballot last month. Proposition T created a Department of Transportation, and that passed at the ballot. Proposition B, to expand the board's budget authority, did not. There are other recommendations to move municipal elections to another date, modernize the city charter language. Those did not make it on the November ballot, but are still being worked on through the Board of Aldermen with consultation with the City Councilor's office, and we do expect those to go on to a ballot in the next few years. Today we're going to hear more about the recommendations or other recommendations that were set by the Charter Commission when Scott Intagliata presents on the Commission's work today. And that work to date, has illustrated the need for ongoing long-term work to modernize the Charter along with the robust community engagement and education process. I think what we learned from that process is when you have a document that was by and large created in 1914, it requires a lot of work and a lot more work than could get done in 1 year's time. One of the things that we also kind of heard from that process was an ask to bring county offices into this process more closely, as we know that there are areas of the city charter that impact county offices as well. And so I really want to thank all of the county offices that did respond and did decide to participate in this ongoing process, as well as the mayor's office for continuing to engage in this process, and our members of the Board of Aldermen who already have a lot on their plates and we're willing to pick up a little bit more to make sure that we continue in this process. So then after the Charter Commission disbanded in August, at the Board of Aldermen, we passed Resolution 144, and that created this Special Committee on Charter Revisions. And as a committee, we are tasked with researching and making recommendations for changes to the Charter with a focus on creating an inclusive process to ensure community engagement. We know whenever we are engaging in something as big as reviewing our city charter, we have to make sure that we have we bring the public along with us. And I think through the RAM settlement process, we have showed that we are capable as a body of engaging tens of thousands of residents in our city in decision-making processes. And my hope is that through this process, we're able to continue that kind of engagement to create a more modern city of St. Louis. Once again, I want to thank the mayor's office and county offices for accepting our invitation, and the members of the Board of Aldermen who decided to help out as well. When all of us can commit to building on the Charter Commission's work and working collaboratively, even if we don't always disagree, I think that's what gets us to a place where we can be successful in modernizing our charter and passing some things that are transformative for our city. So thank you so much. And with that, I wanted to first just have an introduction of committee members, if we could maybe start down at this end and go through, and if everyone could just introduce themselves and what office they are representing. I think your microphone might need to be turned on. There we go.
Dawn Gann Cruz. I'm from the License Collector's Office.
My name is Rachel McClure. I'm the Assistant Collector in the Collector of Revenue's Office.
Alderman Rasheen Aldridge, Ward. Jared Boyd, Chief of Staff in the Mayor's Office.
I'm Brett Narayan. I'm the 4th Ward Alderman.
Christine Ingracia with President Green's office.
Scott Intagliata, former Charter Commission member.
Daniela Velasquez, 6th Ward Alderman.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And with that, I will now turn it over to Scott Intagliata, who will start this meeting off by giving us kind of a recap of the Charter Commission's work, so we have a jumping off point for moving forward.
Good morning. Thank you, President Green. As I start here, I just would like to thank the 8 other commission members who served on the Charter Commission with me and the city staffers who supported that effort over a long and somewhat productive 11 months. I'd like to thank the Board of Aldermen, particularly Alderwoman Annie Rice, who were essential in getting the Charter Commission enacted, Mayor Jones, who appointed the Charter Commission members, and me personally, President Green, for having this committee, Director Ingracia for her work during the Charter Commission and here, and then, of course, all the other members of this committee. If you could advance, please. So we had 11 months of meetings, hundreds of Zooms. I went back last night as I put this together, and I myself had 54 different sort of like formal conversations to it. Some of the commission members had more, and then there were an enormous number of inter-commission conversations, text, emails, that sort of thing. There were outside entities who were interviewed formally or gave and provided information, thousands of pages of documents. So it was a very, very well thought out research, and lots of input was given. There were a number of folks that I spoke to on multiple occasions in a formal interview process, and I know that some of the commission members were much more diligent than I was, so there was no lack of public input. And I counted, I have an electronic notebook I had almost 400 pages of notes from various Charter Commission activity. In addition to all that, then we presented and sought input from the public at 4 different public meetings, as well as 11 formal hearings, many of them in this room. And then there were 3 different committees looking at various portions of the charter, and each of those committees met at least monthly, if not twice monthly. So an enormous amount of work, and what it all resulted in, if we could do it, thank you. And I have emailed this to all members. If you have not received it, it's been printed out and given to you today. We ended up with lots and lots of ideas, but there were 50 proposed charter amendments that people went to try to affect clear language that described what the charter would change, and it referenced the section and the number in the charter that it would follow. And of those 50, a little over 20%, 11 of them, were largely agreed to by the majority of that committee. Those are highlighted in yellow in your email and shaded here in your handout. 3 of those got to the ballot in November. 2 of those passed. The 11 recommendations, 3 of which made it to the ballot, these were issues that, by and large, the vast majority of the Charter Commission members agreed to, and probably merit some review at this point. And I'm going in reverse order as they're in your handout, but allow city employees the right to organize and bargain collectively. One of the commissioners, Chris Grant, who's a well-known local lawyer, works on lots of electoral and labor issues, drafted some very complete language on that. Creating a Department of Transportation, this was something that was brought up continually in conversations and in public meetings, and a number of aldermen and women coalesced around that. It was really spearheaded by Alderman Browning in many respects. But that made it to the ballot and got passed, and that was great. There was a relatively small matter, but could be an impact, and many of the departments that were interviewed brought this up, is that increasing non-advertised expenditures for the supply division from $5,000 to $10,000, which is a pretty modest proposal considering it had been many years since the $5,000 crest had been put there. Modify and modernize pronoun use. Again, that was something that literally I never came across anybody who said that's a terrible idea, except a guy I grew up with who's a bit of a bigot who said you can't, it's terrible. But anyway, so I kind of took that as a matter of course. Change the name of the Board of Aldermen to the City Council. Provide the Board of Aldermen the ability to increase the budget that was on the November ballot and did not pass. And then finally, making voting easier by moving our primary and general elections to August and November of even years to follow the federal cycle, extend the voting notice period in St. Louis City from just 20 days to 30 days, and then expand the notification sources. Currently, the charter asks that at least one daily newspaper carry a notice, and it seems like there's some modernization that could benefit us all there. So those were, if we could advance it, please. Thank you. Yes, next slide, if you don't mind. In addition to these 50, as I went through my documents last evening, there were enormous number of alternate versions as well to the 50 proposed amendments, some of which probably merit, and I'll go back through them and try to highlight them here over the next, several meetings, but alternative proposals on some of the personnel matters and some of the 50. I have emailed all 50 to all of you, and I think it'll make for quick but impactful readings. And I'm happy to answer any questions or tap in or find any information or speak it out with the city councilor's office from those meetings. So, any thoughts or questions? Okay, thank you very much.
There any questions or comments from members of the committee for Mr. Intagliata?
Just want to, just want to thank you for the presentation. A year's worth of conversations and made it pretty concise there, and I want to thank you for that.
And Director Ingracia has printouts also of all of the 50 proposals, just to make sure if you didn't see that in your inbox, we have paper copies of that available as well. So going forward, what we are wanting to do is, and Director Ingracia will follow up after this meeting with an email around this, but what we're hoping to do is two things. One, prioritize some of the 50 that are on this list. So if there are additional ones beyond those 11 that the Charter Commission kind of rose to the top that we think we should investigate or dive into, we want to be able to kind of rank order those and figure out some priorities for researching those more. Also want to take input from commission members about if there are things that are missing. Some of the feedback we heard from some of our county offices, and I really want to thank many of our county office holders from showing up and reaching out, is that there are, the commission did not really touch on county offices very much, and there are some things that can probably be done to modernize and make your jobs easier as well. And so we want to make sure that we are adding those to our running list and of things that need to be evaluated and looked at. I mean, I know at the Board of Aldermen all the time, we go to write a piece of legislation and then we realize, there's something in the charter that was created 80 years ago that ties our hands on some things. And we're like, what is the history of this? How did this ever end up in the charter like this? And I'm sure that every single office in city government has had that experience of wanting to do something or feeling like there was a better way to do something, especially with the advent of technology. We have to remember that our charter was created before there were computers and the internet, but sometimes we can't engage in some of those more modern practices that can create more transparency and community engagement, simply because of the way that the charter is drafted around those policies. So our goal will be in our next meeting to start to kind of rank order and identify what our priorities are in terms of these 50 items, and then also bring forth additional suggestions that you may have. And it doesn't have to be fully thought out or fleshed out piece of legislation, but it could be a concept, or just like this, this part of the charter is confusing, or we've had issues with it, or whatever. We want to hear that, because our goal is to be able to create a report at the end of this commission meeting for the Board of Aldermen to kind of guide our work going forward. And the intent is then every election for the next few years, probably putting 2 or 3 different charter proposals on there as we are able to reach some consensus about what our priorities are and what needs to be done. I think we, through the Charter Commission process, kind of decided that putting 11 things or 6 things on the ballot at the same time might be a little too much for voters. And so being able to spread this out over multiple election cycles, I think gives a better ability to educate the public on decisions that are being made and make sure that the public is engaged in these decision-making processes. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions that folks have about kind of process or suggestions for process going forward. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Great. Thank you, Madam President, Madam Chair. I just wonder, too, if there can be some discussion about, I guess, the mechanics for putting charter amendments on the ballot, or sort of, does it make sense to, I know there's, at least in the county, there was an attempt to kind of put all the charter changes, several charter changes in one ballot initiative or one ballot measure. So is there a way to like bundle several at once? Is there a benefit to doing that? Could you cluster some? Could you, could there be a series of overall charter changes in one section? Or is it going to just be bit by bit? Are there suggestions on what might work better, what might not work as well?
I think some of that is to be determined. If we looking through the 50, there are definitely, I think, some that are connected to each other that could be put into a single one. The thing that we have to be cognizant of is the single subject rule, and that's what I think. If there's things that are, for example, all connected to personnel, then it's easy to put that in one amendment. But if we're talking about, personnel and a change to collector's office and, something at the Board of Aldermen, that would likely violate single subject. And so I think part of these discussions will be what can we consolidate into, one amendment or a couple of amendments, and what things have to be separate in order for us to adhere by the single subject rule. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thinking also about it like strategic. What becomes overwhelming to voters, they have to think about, they had kind of a wide swath of things in addition to everything else this November, but does it make sense for the board to think about, in addition to the single subject rule, thinking about personnel matters in one election, then, I'm just using this as an example, then, these kinds of things the next election? I know it's hard to bundle them, but is there a way that we want to think about going about it that also makes sense for voters to be able to digest, because it's a lot?
Yes, and I definitely agree with that, and I think that's a great idea. And hopefully, as we move forward, we can create some buckets of topics to say all these go in personnel, all these relate to the Board of Aldermen, all of these whatever, and then work with the city councilor's office to make sure that we're in alignment with single subject and all the laws that we have to follow. But I think that makes sense rather than putting, one line item change at a time on the ballot. Yes, we could literally put a line item in perpetuity on the ballot. That doesn't necessarily make sense to do that. So any further questions? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the committee. How we, as far as the committee, are we looking to move in the same process in the spirit of how the Charter Commission did it with, either taking some of these recommendations and then vote them as like a recommendation to the full board, hoping that alders would work on that legislation, or since there are, I guess, 4 alders on the committee that could vote, or are we expecting to vote them out of committee to move them to the full board? How are we gonna?
So I see this committee as sort of our working group to do that more intensive work of bringing in kind of subject matter experts, engaging the public on figuring out the what that needs to be changed. But once amendments are drafted, they will go to the legislation and rules, just like every other charter amendment has. But the intent is that this committee, much like the long-term healthcare committee, kind of creates that report with the marching orders going forward for the legislation and rules committee to kind of know these are the priorities, these are the things we think could be grouped together, and this is the timeline of what we would hope the board would take up to move through the process. Any further questions? Staff board?
Sure. Thank you, President Green and Commissioner Intagliata. I think before we go too far down on a process, I think it would behoove us to both debrief the election results and also set some objectives for what we're trying to do here. I think there are some lessons with the election in the sense of 88% of the voters approved the Department of Transportation because they walk on sidewalks, they drive on streets every day, so it's something that was intuitive for people. And then with raising fines and fees, intuitively, I think they understood that issue, whereas some of the other issues may have seemed more abstract and required just much more public engagement when you restructure government in a way that people don't fully appreciate. So I think, before, like I said, going too far down the road, figuring out what we're trying to do from an objective standpoint and then designing our process after that.
I think that's a great idea. Further comments? Okay. Then with that, as we will not be meeting again until January, but over that time there will be some homework. And so if you would, make sure that you check your email from Chairwoman Ingracia, and we can, I think, start in, first kind of diving into some of these recommendations, and then I think for the meeting in January, let's have a very intentional conversation first about, I think, process and laying out that process, and then have the second piece of that conversation doing a deeper dive on some of the commission recommendations and other recommendations that are being made by various city and county departments that will kind of help give us a jumping off point for the new year. Did I miss anything in that? All right. Well, then with that, I will, I think all members are present, and so
Mr. Butler's not here. Mr. Butler's not here.
Mr. Butler requests to be taken off the committee.
Okay.
So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We will see you in the new year.